All right, so you may have noticed that we get this warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop, and the fix for this is really simple, but I want to explain to you why the key prop is necessary so that you don't just throw it around willy-nilly to get rid of warnings, but you at least understand what's going on. So here we have each one of these LIs has a button, a label, and an input, and that button has an on-click to remove the item for itself. The label is just labeling the input, and it has the value of whatever that value of this item is. And then the input has a default value of that item's value. So I can go ahead and change that value to whatever, and it gets changed as you would expect. Now here's the bug. If I go ahead and remove this apple, then, wow, did you see what happened? This was grape, whatever was with grape, and now it's next to pear. And if I remove the pear, then the other two stay as they were, but wow, let's look at that again. So we'll start here with removing the pear. Okay, everything's good. But then if I remove the apple, then apple input stays right there, orange input stays there, but the other two labels are moving. So what's going on here? Well, let's take a few steps back. Let's make sure we understand what's going on right here. So when we do items.map, this function that we're calling on this array of items is mapping over each item and returning whatever we return from this function. And so ultimately what gets rendered out here is an array of elements. So if I console.log that same thing here, well, that's going to explode. So let's console log it within the same scope of those items there. And we got to have proper syntax here. Get rid of that. Okay. Great, so now if we look at this, we're going to see an array of elements. So that's what we're passing as the children of this UL, is we're passing an array. Okay, so that's fine, but why is that a problem? Well, how does React know if you remove an element of an array, or if you just remove the last element of an array and then change the values here between some renders? Like, that's something that you could totally do. So maybe remove 2, add 1, change the value of these different things. So React doesn't really have any idea what caused the particular change in the JSX that you're returning. All that it knows is that the JSX was changed. Those React elements you're returning are totally different, and it does its very best to update the DOM based on the changes that you provided. But remember, this default value is just the initial value of that input, and once we initialize it, thereafter that value can be changed by the browser or anything. So React isn't going to keep that up to date even if we provide a new default value for this. So what's happening here is we're saying, hey, let's remove this first one. React is like, I'm not sure what happened here, so we're just going to do the very best that we can, and in this case it guesses wrong. Sometimes it guesses right, but in this case it guessed wrong. So how do we go about fixing this problem? Well, if we add a key prop, and here we're going to say item.id for that key prop, well, now React knows if you removed an item and updated its contents, or if you added an item, whatever you did, because it can track that element over time. And so this totally fixes the problem. We can type in whatever here, we remove that one and it's gone. We can add it back. We can remove any of these elements in any order, and they stay consistent where the label is labeling the same input. So providing that key prop is a key solution to this particular problem. And you'll feel this problem with anything that maintains state over time. So the input is a good example, or any component that's maintaining state will also experience this problem. So the key prop is really important. And whenever you see that warning, you want to make sure that you provide a unique key for each element of the array that you're rendering. And just randomly generating a key right here is not going to cut it, because it needs to be consistent for the React element that's representing the particular item. So having an ID is preferable, because that's something that can be unique for each one of these items. But if you don't have an ID, then maybe you could generate an ID for the items before you go to render them, or you could use something else about the items that's unique. But don't try to use the index of that item, because that's actually the default behavior. So if we do item and then index, and then we pass the index, then we'll get the exact same behavior that we had before, which is not the behavior that we want. So don't use the index. That'll silence the warning, but not get rid of the problem. You need to do some sort of unique identifier for the particular item that you're trying to represent when you're rendering an array.